Hey kiddos, it's back to school time. A lot of you will be taking anthropology courses for the first time, and because we currently live in a pandemic hellscape, you'll also be taking those courses online. So I thought this would be the perfect time for me to release a video talking about how you can ace your anthropology course. I must warn you that I am not an education expert. I majored in anthropology and had a 3.7 GPA in that major, and I did 2 years as a teaching assistant grading undergrad papers. The second disclaimer is that this whole video will be heavily focused in on cultural anthropology, the only anthropology subdiscipline that is valid. Some other anthropology YouTuber appear so that I have someone to beef with. Now that I've gotten all of those disclaimers out of the way, we can focus on the fun part of the video, like homework. Oh boy, everyone's gonna love this video.
Okay, so what's your workload going to look like for this class? Well, typically you'll have 1 to 3 sources a week, roughly 30 to 70 pages total, that you're expected to read, and 3 to 4 exams that will grade you on those readings via multiple choice. These may or may not be cumulative depending on how much of a hard ass that professor wants to be. If your teacher is a bit extra, you might also have to submit a weekly journal where you talk about that week's reading. So, how do we go about reading the text?
Well, you see, my first piece of advice is
Skim.
now, skim reading usually gets a bad rep, and for obvious reasons. Your professor isn't assigning you these readings just to punish you. They want you to actually learn something from it. But also, most people don't know how to actually skim read. But if you do skim reading right, then you can create a guideline that helps you actually get through the assignment and remember what you learn in the process.
What most people imagine when they hear skim reading is a person frantically glancing through a text, trying to have their eyes look at the bare minimum possible in the hopes that whatever was important has been absorbed and that they now know enough to pass the test.
But if you do skim reading right, then you can create a guideline that helps you actually get through the assignment and remember what you learn in the process.
First thing you should do is pull up your text. I actually recommend printing it because I hate trees, but I know that ink is expensive. You should also have a notebook open with something to write with. I recommend colored pens or highlighters if you have them available, but if you don't, we can make do without. Next thing you should do is read the title of the text and write it out on the top of your paper. If it mentions any words that you're unfamiliar with or are used in a way you don't understand, it's important to make a note of that, either by highlighting that in the document or writing a note about it on the reading itself. After that, you should scan through the document to see if there's any subheadings. Make note of what they are, and if they have any unfamiliar words, repeat the steps that I told you to do with the title. Now that you've made a note of these unfamiliar words, you should go through the text again to see when they're used and highlight or underline them. If you want to get fancy, you can color code them. While you're doing this, if you happen to see any definitions for the terms you're highlighting, you should write those down. If you get bored doing this, it's totally okay to take a break to doodle on your notes, or better yet, break out some Play-Doh, because trying to be a functioning human being in the year of our Satan 2020 is hard, and nothing feels better than putting all of your feelings into a lump of rainbow-colored goo and giving it a good squish. Once you've finished this section with a couple of squishing sessions, you'll see that you've now created a guide map for yourself. Now it's time to actually read the text and take notes.
My advice for taking notes in anthropology is don't stress the details. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, when you're first reading a text in any academic course, but especially in anthropology, sometimes it can be difficult to know what about it is going to be important when you're first reading it. So different courses will typically test you on different factors. Like if you're taking a historic course, They typically want you to remember all of the dates for some reason, and in anthropology, you're typically expected to remember the what, the why, and the how.
So you've finished your assigned readings and you've done your notes. What's next? Well, if you have a weekly journal, you're now going to use those notes to write the journal. And the number one rule of weekly journal writing is don't summarize.
Back in my days as a TA, before the war, I used to have to read hundreds of journals. And every time I told them, don't summarize the reading. And when they did, and I put down my marker of justice, what did they respond with? They sent me emails after emails saying, hey miss, like, when did I get 100 on this? Look, I get it. High school taught you to summarize and you got A's in high school, so you figure the same thing works in college. Except in university, it's not just about doing what you were told, it's also about engaging with the material. So here's a little something to give your thing a little spice, a little je ne sais quoi. Take whatever concept you were supposed to learn that week and use it in an example. Now, is this advice rocket science? Well, no. If I could do rocket science, I wouldn't have become a humanities major. But it does apply the concepts and show that you actually learned something. So now you've got a big anthropology exam coming up, but oh no, your professor made you read so many things, there's no way you can read them all before the exam. This is easily fixed. Just take those notes that I showed you how to write earlier for each reading and read them again. Oh, what? That's not hard enough for you? You want me to go harder? Well, I can go harder!
Here are my other suggestions. Take a new piece of paper and copy any definitions or ideas you're struggling with from your notes. Do that once or twice, then put away the notes and try to recall the definition either from memory or by writing it down again. Make a recording of yourself reading off the definitions or explanations for the concepts that you're going to be tested on. Then play that back to help you memorize. If you have a friend or family member that's willing to listen, try to explain the terms to them. The point of all of this is to strengthen the connections in your brain. Some people don't really need these tips and they can get by just by reading the text once. Some people will be okay if they read it once and take notes. But every time that you engage with a text, you're strengthening those connections.
So that's it for my tips and tricks for how to ace your anthropology course. If there was something I missed or you have a more specific question, don't be afraid to drop a comment below. And if you like what I do and you want to see more anthropology content on YouTube, please don't be afraid to like and subscribe. So one more thing before I bid you all adieu. I'm getting to the final stage of my thesis. Yay! But this means that I have less time to write, record, and edit a video for YouTube. So for that reason, I'm going to be slowing down a little bit here. This doesn't mean that I'm wholesale abandoning the channel. It just means that for the time being, probably until Christmas, stuff that's coming out is going to be a little looser and a little bigger spaces between. But I want you to all know that you're all A+s in my heart. You see? You see the little holographic stickers I put on there? Bye, y'all.